All right, good morning. Thanks everyone for joining us. We're really glad to have you with us today for our O'Donnell Awards information session. My name is Terrence Henry. I'm the Executive Director of TAMEST, the Texas Academy of Medicine, Engineering, Science, and Technology. And thanks again for being here today. We really appreciate the time and effort that goes into preparing nominations for the Edith and Peter O'Donnell Awards. So we hope this session is helpful for you and provides information that helps lead to a successful nomination. Before we begin today, I'd like to tell you just a little bit about TAMEST and what we do. We support collaboration to advance research, innovation, human talent development, and business in Texas. TAMEST is composed of more than 340 Texas-based members of the three national academies: the National Academy of Medicine, National Academy of Engineering, National Academy of Sciences, as well as other honorary societies, and the state's 9 Nobel laureates. You can learn more about our mission and initiatives on our website, which is tamest.org. We're supported by 20 research universities and medical centers that you can see on the slide here that are our TAMEST member institutions. They help make the O'Donnell Awards program possible, as well as our other initiatives, and we thank them for their ongoing support. Go over the agenda for today's session. We have the chair of our awards committee, Dr. Oliver Mullins, who will be giving you some history and background on the awards. Dr. Mullins is an SLB fellow at SLB, formerly Schlumberger, and a member of the National Academy of Engineering. He has previously served as the chair of the Technology Innovation Committee. Also joining us today is Dr. Margaret Goodell, a professor and chair of the Department of Molecular and Cellular Biology and director of the Stem Cells and Regenerative Medicine Center, and Vivian L. Smith Chair of Regenerative Medicine at Baylor College of Medicine. Dr. Goodell is a member of the National Academy of Medicine, and she was also the 2011 recipient of the Edith and Peter O'Donnell Award in Medicine, so really the perfect person to help guide you in your nominations. She serves as the Medicine Subcommittee Chair and will discuss what the awards committees look for in a successful application. After that, we'll hear from our TAMEST Program Officer, Stephanie Shaw. She'll review the nomination guidelines and eligibility requirements before we open up the floor to questions. Please hold off on unmuting yourself until we get to the Q&A portion of the info session later in the meeting. If you do have a question that comes up before the Q&A, you're welcome to go ahead and submit it in advance in the chat box in Zoom, and then we'll answer it when we get to the Q&A. And with that, I'll now turn it over to Dr. Oliver Mullins, the chair of the O'Donnell Awards Committee. Dr. Mullins, thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Terrence, and thank you to the participants for your interest in nominating a Texas researcher for this important award. The Edith and Peter O'Donnell Awards annually recognize rising star researchers who are addressing the essential role that science and technology play in society and whose work meets the highest standards of exemplary professional performance, creativity, and resourcefulness. The awards are named in honor of Edith and Peter O'Donnell, who were steadfast supporters of TAMEST since its inception and incredible advocates for excellence in education and research. Established in 2006, the O'Donnell Awards acknowledge outstanding achievements by Texas-based researchers in 5 categories: medicine, engineering, biological sciences, physical sciences, and technology innovation. The Technology Innovation Award was added in 2008 to recognize individuals and research teams from non-academic institutions who have made a major innovative technological discovery with potential for making a positive impact on society. There will be a separate information session solely for the Technology Innovation Award today at 2 p.m. If you are interested in attending, please reach out to Stephanie Shaw for registration. Her contact information will be included on the last slide of this presentation. To date, there have been 72 recipients of the awards, and 15 recipients have been elected to the national academies. Recipients of the awards each receive a medal that has a distinct pattern reflective of the discipline. a $25,000 honorarium, and the opportunity to present at TAMEST annual conference. The awards are presented to the recipients at the O'Donnell Awards dinner, which takes place on the evening of the second day of the TAMEST annual conference. TAMEST 2024 annual conference will be held February 5 through 7, 2024 at the AT&T Center in Austin. More details will become available as plans progress. Nominees for medicine, engineering, biological sciences, and physical sciences should come from academic institutions. Nominees for technology innovation should come from industry organizations. The awards committee is composed of a committee chair and 15 TAMEST members, each serving a 3-year term. There are 5 subcommittees, each representing one of the 5 awards categories: medicine, engineering, biological science, physical science, and technology innovation. Subcommittees select finalists to advance to the external review stage, where National Academies members outside of Texas review the finalist materials and submit their comments. The Technology Innovation Subcommittee conducts its own site visits for the selected finalists. After a thorough review of the candidates, the awards committee recommends awards recipients to be submitted to the Nobel Laureates Committee. The Nobel Laureates Committee reviews the recommended recipients and submits its endorsement to the TAMEST Board of Directors for final approval. I'd now like to ask Peggy Goodell to discuss what subcommittees are looking for in successful nominations. Peggy?
Thank you, Oliver. My name is Margaret Goodell. I also go by Peggy. Thank you for introducing me. I am the Medicine Subcommittee Chair this year for the 2024 O'Donnell Awards. I'd like to talk a little bit about what the Medicine, Engineering, Biological Sciences, and Physical Sciences subcommittees are looking for in successful applications. There are several components, as you'll see when you look at the application materials, or the submission materials. There is a 250-word and a 50-word summary. I would say these are essentially the most important parts of the application, because there's a diverse group of submissions every year, and a diverse group of expertise of the members on each subcommittee. So it's worth spending time on the summaries and being concise and clear in writing them, really for the broad audience, and really conveying what discoveries were important in the context of the field. The committee also looks very closely at the nominees' CVs. We look at total number of papers, productivity, but also in what journals the papers were published. I would say quality is much more important than quantity. We do not count publications. We're really looking at the quality of the papers that were published. The H factor, impact factor of an individual is used by some to gauge the importance of publications, but it's really not a big decider in terms of what the committees are really looking for. There are also 5 publications of the nominee that are required to be submitted, and the committees look at these closely. The publication should be from primary literature on which the nominee was either first or last author, and these should not be reviews. We are looking for original descriptions of work for which the nominee is being put forward. We also look at the specific activity of the publication. For example, if those 5 publications have been heavily cited over the past few years, this is an indication that they are high impact papers and that this candidate is a top nominee. Obviously, the converse is also true. If the publications have not been cited very heavily, they haven't really gotten much attention in the field, this is not such a strong indication. But the papers and their citation rates are really only a portion of what we are looking for in a successful nomination. I would say the 3 letters of support are also extremely important. These are really conveying who the authors are and what they have done in the field. We look at who has written the letters and their relationship to the candidate. Are they their dissertation mentor or postdoctoral mentor? Or are they a colleague at the same institution? Or are they a highly esteemed faculty member at a distinct institution who really knows the impact of that candidate's work in the field? And what is the stature of that letter writer? Do the writers know the candidates personally or only by reputation or a combination of both? These aspects typically come out in letters, often directly or indirectly. And so these letters really are an important component of the whole package that is really examined very closely. I also want to emphasize that the awards are merit-based. We do not look at what Texas institution had a candidate who won last year. We don't say somebody from this school can't receive it this year. Those things are really not taken into account. We don't also award in specific areas each year. For example, we don't say, oh, we're going to concentrate on astrophysics this year and next year it will be biochemistry or whatever. The actual area of research does not change if someone won the award in that particular area in a previous year, as long as they are the most meritorious of the candidates. A minor part of the evaluation is that if there are two equally deserving candidates and one is in their last year of eligibility and the other has multiple years of eligibility left, that may be considered weighed in the final deliberations, but it is not a hard and fast rule. And really that's not a major aspect of the consideration. With that, I will hand it over to Stephanie Shaw to discuss more guidelines, and there will be opportunity for questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Stephanie Shaw, and I am the program officer here at TAMEST. So nomination guidelines and eligibility requirements differ between the medicine, engineering, biological sciences, and physical sciences awards and the Technology Innovation Award. For the medicine, engineering, biological, and physical sciences awards, nomination guidelines include that nominators must choose only one category, so either medicine, engineering, biological sciences, or physical sciences, to designate their nominee. Research teams may be nominated in any category, and each team member receives a citation and medal, and the honorarium is divided evenly among the team. Eligible nominators include TAMEST members, past O'Donnell Awards recipients, university presidents, chancellors, deans, provosts, department chairs, and vice presidents for research. And all nominees will be automatically renominated for the following 2 years after their initial nomination, as long as the nominees still meet all eligibility requirements. If a nominator would like to withdraw a nominee or add supplemental information to the nomination packet, they may contact the TAMEST office. We do strongly recommend updating the nomination materials for renominations to share anything new from the year since the original nomination. Eligibility requirements include the following criteria. Nominees must be within 15 years of their first faculty appointment at the time the awards are given at the conference. Nominees must have spent the past 2 years performing research in Texas at the time the application is submitted. For team nominations, all team members must meet award eligibility requirements, and TAMEST members are not eligible. For the timeline for this year, the call for nominations opened in February, and the deadline is April 30th. In June, each subcommittee will meet to review and discuss the nominations in their category and determine the candidates that will move forward to the next step of review. The full awards committee will then meet and discuss the candidates that will be moving forward to the next step of review, and top candidates nomination materials for medicine, engineering, biological sciences, and physical sciences are submitted to external reviewers for ranking and comments. In August, the full awards committee will meet to discuss the external reviewers' input and make final recommendations for the award finalists. The finalists will also be submitted to Nobel Laureate Committee for their review and approval, and then they will be submitted to the TAMEST Board of Directors for final approval. In October, the award recipients are notified along with their nominators. The nominators of the candidates who were not selected will be notified at this time as well. And then the award recipients will be announced in January. Nomination guides, eligibility requirements, application forms, and a frequently asked questions are accessible on the TAMEST website at tamest.org/O'Donnell-awards. I will now turn it back over to Terrence Henry to moderate the Q&A for today's session.
Thanks, Stephanie. We're again glad to have all of you here today, and this is a great opportunity for you to ask questions of our committee members and our staff about the nomination process and selection process. So if you do have questions, you can either raise your hand and we can unmute you to ask your question, or you can simply type a question in the chat box and we will read it out and answer it through there. So we're now open for Q&A. All right, we have a raised hand from Clint McGill. So if you can unmute yourself and ask your question, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm at Texas A&M. We have a potential candidate, and the question is, she started as a research assistant professor in 2008. And so this would be getting near the end of the time, but I didn't know if research assistant professor that's not a tenure track and so forth, is that the starting date? Because otherwise it might be better to wait a few years to nominate her.
Let's turn that one over to you, Dr. Goodell. Thank you.
I mean, actually, that's like a technical question. Did she go eventually onto tenure track?
She did, yeah, she did it several years ago now. She was out of the state for 5 or 6 years. She was with the state chemist as an assistant prof, research assistant prof. So she's here full time.
So, I mean, I would actually have to look at the fine print on the application materials for that, but I suspect that her start date would count when she was a tenure track assistant professor and further. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for your question. Looks like we have another question from Dr. Richard Dixon. If you could unmute yourself and introduce yourself and ask your question.
Sure, yeah, this is Rick Dixon, the University of North Texas. I was just wondering, and it's probably doesn't happen, but what if the Nobel Laureate Committee has issues with any of the candidates? What would happen then?
I don't think that's happened in the past that I'm aware of. Stephanie or Terrence?
Yes, that has not happened. But if that were to happen, we would have to go back to the subcommittee that the finalist is from and regroup after that. But yes, that has never happened. We've had some good finalists go through the subcommittee and then kind of get vetted through the external reviewers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's extremely unlikely, but just interested just in case. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for the question. Next, we'll turn to Ilya Finkelstein. If you could unmute yourself and introduce yourself and ask your question, we'll hear from you. Thank you.
Hi, I have two questions. I'm from UT Austin, by the way. The first question is, can you clarify, you mentioned a few different kinds of letters of recommendation from former mentors, folks who are of high stature in the field and so on. What does the committee typically see and what does the committee typically prefer?
Sure. The committee typically sees the whole range. And actually, I think that the most compelling are from members of the field who are not formerly, mentors of the individual, the members of the field who can speak to the impact that investigator has had on the field. That's really what's really carried the day. So-and-so has done this work and it's changed the field in this way, or it's impacted work of others in the field. So similar to the kinds of letters that one would get for promotion, but as broad and impactful of a writer as possible.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And my second question was about this automatic renomination process. So does an institution need to take any proactive steps to renominate an individual? They go in, they're automatically in the pool, and if they nominate someone else, do both folks stay nominated, or does one trump the other?
There's no limit in the number of nominees from a particular institution. So they all can stay in, the new ones can go in the pool and they can stay in the pool. We have found that, and there's no requirement really to update the materials. However, I would say it is helpful to do so. Almost everybody's had a new paper or so in the meantime, and the impact of a particular paper might have risen, or there will be other activities that nominee has been involved in. So particularly from the, if the nomination materials, at least at the minimum, the CV would change, I think it's worthwhile. And if circumstances in the field change, that the nominators' letters of reference would be impacted by that, then it might be useful to ask those to be refreshed as well.
So I guess my question is, how many of the awardees were awarded after a renomination versus a first nomination? Is it common for a renomination to be successful?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions. Much appreciated.
Thanks for your question. We'll now turn to Betty Kim if you want to unmute and introduce yourself, and then we'll hear your question. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Betty Kim. I'm a neurosurgeon scientist here at MD Anderson. My question is about some clarification on, if you're eligible for potentially the medicine or the engineering, how does that process work? And is it better to go through one route and be transferred out because it's less quote unquote competitive, or just to strategize? Thank you.
I mean, that is a great question. And I would say most candidates neatly fit into one or another category, but there are certainly several that we have each year that could fit into several. And I mean, that's true now because we have the biological sciences and the medicine, and we also have had, we've also had biological scientists win in other categories as well. So I would say really try to identify the category that that you think that your work has had the most impact in terms of the field. And there certainly are, there's a phase where the subcommittees look at them, and if they think that a nominee would fit better in another category, we transfer them over. But I would say it's always best to hit the first category first. And yeah, it's without knowing, the details, it would be impossible to really recommend which one. And you can try to, game the system by thinking which is less competitive, but I would say they're all incredibly competitive. And so really think about where, your work or the nominee's work has made the most impact. And I just want to sort of emphasize for everybody on the call, the competitive nature. At least the medicine subcommittee that I've been on the last 2 years and I'm chair of this year. I mean, we have on the order of 20 nominations in a typical year. And then there's a short list that then we end up discussing in a lot of detail. And it's the number of really great candidates, especially in the top half, that all have multiple high impact papers from their, the last 10 years or so of their career, is enormous. And it is a really, really difficult thing to do. And so again, that's why, picking the category is important, but also really thinking how has the nominee's work impacted the field? Like what has changed? What is different now? How does it make people think differently? How do you communicate that to a really broad audience? You can see the members that are serving on each committee and think that those are the people that are vetting this at the first pass, and that's who you have to speak to, and why the work of this nominee is important. I can't emphasize that enough. When you get to these really high levels with competition and people are working in many different areas, conveying why the work is important to a broad readership is really the key.
Thank you, Dr.
I just add, these are all very competitive awards, and there are new nominees every year. So you can't really try to gauge which is an easier award to get. They're all very difficult to obtain. And so you lead with your best shot, where you think you've had the most impact, or where your candidate has had the most impact. And that's always going to be the prescription.
Great, thank you. So now we'll hear a question from Dr. Malu Picard-Ami. And if you can unmute yourself, introduce yourself and ask your question. Thank you.
Unmute. Okay, I got that.
There you go.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Dr. Academy from UTEP. I work in the ORSP. And I want to try to understand better how the two statements, the 50-word and the 250-word, would work together and complement each other instead of being just a summary of each other, because each piece is key. And so I'm assuming that you're expecting very different pieces to be in one and the other. So how would they kind of work together to be stronger? What are you expecting in one and the other?
So your audio is not fantastic. So I'm going to repeat the question and hope that we got it right. What you're trying to understand is the difference between the 50-word and the 250-word statement and how you can use them to support each other and not necessarily be redundant.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I would say they are complementary and probably somewhat redundant. I mean, the 50-word is, in a way, to put it very bluntly, the sound bite of what the accomplishment is. Obviously, it's extremely short to do that. But the 250-word allows you to amplify that in a little bit more detail. So yeah, you can use different words to really explain the impact better. So maybe the 50-word is really, the discovery or the contribution itself, and then the 250-word will put it in a better context. Maybe Oliver can comment on that.
Yeah, I think it's a nice description, Peggy. And I think the idea is that you really want to have a short description of the importance of the discovery and have some independent validation, not just a statement from you, but an independent validation as much as possible.
Okay.
And the 250 words allows you to elaborate, characterizing what the invention or the discovery is. And then really, there's always this issue about independent validation. Peggy addressed it with regard to the reference letters, that it's much better to have a judge, not somebody that has a vested interest or could be perceived as too biased, but an independent and formidable external judge or statement of fact. We'll get into the technology innovation later, but revenue of a service is an example of an independent validation that something is important. So you always want to be able to make the case to people who are not expert in your discipline, what is the importance of this discovery, and how can you validate that importance? You always take the perspective that you don't want people to trust your assessment. You want an independent validation that the discovery is important.
Right, kind of the evidence and back it up. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for your questions. So we have time for a couple more questions. If you want to raise your hand or type a question in the chat, now would be a great opportunity to ask questions of the committee members. All right, we'll do one last call for questions. It looks like Betty Kim, you have your hand raised, but I believe we did give you a chance to ask a question, but if you have another one, please feel free to. Okay. How about Dr. Finkelstein? Yes.
Yeah, so sorry, I cannot raise hand in the app. Yeah. Okay, so this is Fan Zhang from UT Dallas, and I have a question about this 5 application to be selected. I remember in the website that there is a description, we need to pick up the 5 most cited paper, but in the introduction you just given, you suggest we pick up papers we are either first or last authors. So my question is, those two, groups of papers do not, overlap. In this case, what should I pick up?
Okay. So I'm not aware that it says in the instructions that you have to upload the most cited paper. I would say there are circumstances if you've published a really important paper recently, 2 years ago, you may have other papers that were published 15 years ago that have more citations. So I would not use citation. I would think of impact on the field. That is what people look at. Now, if you're thinking about whether you're first or last author, I use that really as a proxy to determine your role in that. What the awards are trying to recognize is the candidates, let's call it leadership of that discovery, okay, and role in that discovery. If you're a middle author on a paper and it might be a super highly cited paper, we're going to probably assume that you weren't driving that discovery forward. You're more likely to be the driver if you're the first author or the last author. In fact, most of the candidates have their own research groups and are usually the last author on these papers. And it's usually from their independent work that's more heavily weighted. So it's definitely not about picking the papers that are most cited. It's about picking the papers that have had the biggest impact on the field that the candidate has driven forward.
Okay.
Oliver, do you want to? Yeah.
Yeah, just in papers, it's really important. What's very important for these awards is not a group member that happens to fit within the age requirements or the years since first position, but rather it's the impact that that individual has played. But we always recognize that there are teams contributing across the board, but it has to be a leadership position. And that has to be, again, it's one of these things that has to have validation independently of the assessment of the nominator. It has to be documented. And of course, publications is the primary documentation for these academic awards. So it should be very clear the role of the candidate played in the discovery that's being really cited and used for the application of the candidacy.
Right.
So, and it's definitely not a list of the most cited papers, to be clear. The citations is an index that's important. And in the description, there might be, I think Peggy might have mentioned, there could be very high numbers of citations, which is an indicator of importance, or a very low number, which is indicating potentially the opposite. So it's all part of that calculation. But the primacy of the candidate in these discoveries is key. And then the importance of the discovery also is key. And they both need independent metrics to establish this.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your question. Looks like we have a question from Zhifeng Ren. We'll go ahead and hear from you.
Thank you. Thanks for this very informative session. I myself is a recipient of a Science Award back in 2014. I know it's extremely competitive. And right now I have a question to Peggy and also probably Oliver. Is the competitiveness obviously is good, but in a sense, at the end, every year we have so many outstanding candidates and we only award one so far. And then some of the ones, the difference between the outstanding ones and the winner, final winner, and the runner-up or two runner-ups, it's very minor, I would say sometimes. Not every year, but sometimes it's very minor. Is there any thought of the TAMEST organization to consider in the future to give more than one recipient per year? Just like Nobel Prize winners, right? It's not just, could be one, could be more than one, but there's a limit. Yeah.
I think that's really a question for Terrence, but even for the Nobel Prize, it's for one discovery that 3 people have had a contribution to. So it's not, first, second, third prize for work done. So anyway, maybe Terrence can address the additional awards.
Yeah, I think as you mentioned, it is highly competitive, but we've seen the results of that competitiveness. So we've had 15 recipients go on to be elected to the National Academies.
Right.
3 of those have actually been elected to more than one National Academy. And as we mentioned earlier, when discussing renominations, several, if not many, of the eventual recipients of the O'Donnell Awards are renominations. So in instances where it is highly competitive and maybe a close call, you could say, there's a good chance that that runner-up might end up getting the award the following year, or even a year after that while they remain eligible. We have expanded the awards now from 4 to 5 so that we can have both biological sciences and physical sciences recognized every year. That's thanks to an additional gift from the O'Donnell Foundation last year that we were able to expand the awards. I'll also add that TAMEST internally is looking at opportunities where we can, I guess, keep an eye on the nominations for the O'Donnell Awards and see what additional engagement opportunities we might be able to have for those finalists for the awards as they move forward in their careers. So while we're not exploring adding a runner-up or second place category right now for the awards, we are looking to see if there's more that we can do to help advance these researchers, because as you noted, they are exceptional and this is highly competitive. So we want to see if there's more we can do.
Thank you.
Thanks. Looks like we have a question from Carla Sharp.
And Dr. Finkelstein has his hand up again too. So yeah, but let's take Carla. Yeah.
Hi, Carla Sharp, Associate Dean for Research in College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences at University of Houston. I just want to ask how strict is the 15-year period, and related, I assume that, it takes time to really make an independent contribution. So I assume it's usually folks sort of later on and closer to the 10-15 year period that usually get the rewards.
Certainly, I can speak to the latter point. I mean, just as you point out, statistically, I mean, people have been more likely, even if they made an impactful discovery in the first 10 years, it takes a while for the impact of that discovery to become clear. And so in general, more of them tend to be in the latter half of the 15-year eligibility. But I don't know if there's any variation in the 15-year requirement, Stephanie or Terrence.
Yeah, so the 15 years is from, we started when the award is given at the conference. So that would be for this case, February of 2024, so 15 years back from then. And we do try to keep it strict, because if we have some wiggle room, it can tend to expand a bit. So we like to have it 15 years from the time that the award's given at the conference in 2024 for this instance.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your question. So back to Ilya Finkelstein, looks like you have another question.
Yes, thank you. A few questions came up from an applicant's perspective or potential applicant's perspective after this discussion. First, how do you view co-last authorship manuscripts? And second, how do you advise potential applicants to frame multiple discoveries? Do they focus on a single thing, or do they focus on a broad approach, or with maybe contributions to different fields? Just curious.
No, I think that's a fair question. I'm certainly from like a co-senior authorship position. I personally, I have a lot of those myself, and I am supportive of that kind of teamwork. I just think that if it's not clear at all, if it's not completely clear from the work, then it should be made clear what the contribution is. If the person is not last author, it should be made clear by the nomination materials, like the letters and so on and so forth. I mean, often, for example, I work with bioinformaticians, and it's pretty easy to tell, that my work is the wet bench and the bioinformatician is the dry bench. And so somebody looking at the application materials could, if it was from, included me, could tell what contributions I was likely to have made. But if it was, if we're co-senior authors, but if it wasn't completely clear, then that needs to be clear somewhere else, so that the leadership position is or activity is clear from that. And from the multiple work, I think, again, you can rely on the letters to convey that this person has had impact in, let's say, multiple areas. And if you can squeeze it in to the 250 word statement, then that would be another place to do it. It's not really for one discovery. It is really for the impact that person has had in the field. One discovery is easier to describe. Oliver?
Yeah, just comment on that, one of the awardees had a long history of contributing in a particular discipline, but there was a clear, that the impact of that contribution was clearly focused in one arena, one specific thing. So that history was important to establish that kind of legacy, but then the impact really was focused. And so I think as Peggy says, you focus on the impact, and then that's primary. And so you don't want to have a long list, a laundry list of things this person contributed to if the impact is really disparate. If it's in one particular area, that's what you focus on, is the impact.
All right, thank you. Dr. Sharp, do you have another question?
Oh, so sorry, no. I'll lower my hand.
Thank you. It's fine. All right, we've got time for one more question. If anyone would like to raise their hand or type a question in the chat box before we part ways today. All right, well, we'll just give you some closing information. I want to thank again all of you for joining us, and thank you for your interest in this awards program. We're excited to see the nominations that you'll submit this year. I want to thank Dr. Mullins and Dr. Goodell for taking the time to be with us today and share this information with you, and thank them for their service on the O'Donnell Awards Committee and our other committee members. We could not do this without you. We hope you found all this information helpful. We're going to have the video of today's session and the slides up on our TAMEST website, and we'll also send you a follow-up email with that. And just a reminder, the deadline for nominations will be April 30th, 2023, so end of next month. After that, in May, we've got our big TAMEST annual meeting, which will be at the Texas Medical Center this year. It's called Forward Texas Accelerating Change, and it'll be May 23rd to 25th at the Intercontinental Medical Center in Houston. We're going to get some really top-level, celebrated, innovative researchers and scientists together to look at how science is leading to fundamental changes in society. We're going to take a look at 4 specific areas where we're already seeing some profound transitions underway: CRISPR gene editing, big data science, renewable energy, and decarbonization. And you'll have a chance to hear from this year's recipients of the Edith and Peter O'Donnell Awards the afternoon of Wednesday, May 24th. They'll get to present their work on stage to the conference audience. And later that evening, we're going to celebrate them with an awards ceremony and dinner, which is always a highlight of the TAMEST annual meeting. So TAMEST members and faculty at TAMEST member institutions receive discounted registration for the conference, and the event's also open to all in the research community. So you can take a look at our website, again, tamest.org, to learn more. Hope you'll join us to be there for that wonderful special meeting at the annual conference at TMC in May. And that'll close our session for today. Just as a reminder, the deadline is April 30th, 2023 for your O'Donnell Awards nominations. If you do have questions that come up in the submission or nomination process, please feel free to contact Stephanie Shaw, our TAMEST program officer. She can help you address those as you move along. So that concludes our session for today. Thanks again for joining us, and we hope to see your nominations come in very soon. Take care. Thank you.